and be approved for 5 months and 7 days, I think it is.
How many hours?
3 hours and 57 minutes, not counting of books. Welcome to the meeting. This is our first annual members meeting in person. 3 years. It's just remarkable how, when you look back at the pandemic, it's had such an effect on our lives. The meeting is for the Trust to present its report about its performance in 21-22 to its members. Okay, as you said, our members are made up of interested members of the public and our staff. This is also the first hybrid meeting we've had, I think, ever, where the Trust welcomes members in person. We've also got colleagues online who you cannot see, but I assure you are there. They are there, are they, Nicola? Yeah. Excellent. We have 2 members at the moment joining us online. They can see us, we can't see them. Those online can submit any questions they wish through the question box, and a member of the team at the back who is now wandering around the room. Okay. We'll be able to read those questions out, and at the end, if there are any questions, Lady Vale, who's head of communications, who is wandering around the room throwing all the manner of errors, will be accessing those questions. Also, any non-members are welcome today, and if they would like to become a member of the Trust, then they can speak to Nicola Troy, who is sitting behind the desk here, and she will help you join up through our website. In terms of board members who are present today, and the lead governor, I'm going to ask governors and the lead governor just to introduce themselves so that everybody online or in the room is aware of who they are. Am I right?
I'm Barbara Strong, I'm lead governor.
On my left.
I'm John Ross, I'm Chief Executive.
I'm the Medical Director.
Mike Burns, Chief Finance Officer.
And next to Mike Burns is Angela Bieri, who will be from Grant Walton and will be presenting about our accounts as part of the financial report. In the room today,
Paul May, I'm one of the non-exec directors.
Sue Ray,
sorry,
is substitute nurse.
and there he is.
Yeah, David Toplin, Non-Executive Director.
I think it's light under a bush at the back, but there he is, David Toplin. Okay. Most of the new governors, and we have several with us today, have introduced themselves to us. So we have 6 staff members, 6 public members, 12 confirmed governors, up to 11 attending online, and 2 via MS Teams. So there's quite a crowd of people in different locations, which makes this an interesting meeting to chair. So, are there any declarations of interest that anybody wishes to bring to my attention in the room? No, or online? No activity. So, Nicola, they're along. Now, the agenda, have you had the agenda? People see the agenda? And nod will be great. Thank you. Well, if you haven't, the next several items will run one after the other, which is several presentations. So very quickly, there'll be a presentation on transcranial MRI guided focused ultrasound. It sounds very complicated. It is, but it will be made very clear to you by Dr. Jay Panica, the consultant urologist who will be presenting. That will be immediately followed by an annual report from the Chief Executive, Jen Ross. That will be followed by the Trust strategy being reported on by the Medical Director, Andy Nicholson. The annual accounts being reported on by Mike Burns, supported by Angela, who's disappeared with other issues, Angela there. And then the Trust Constitution, I will report on. I will take a 30-second break or more in that one, because we have to have a certain thing ratified by you all today, which I'll come to later. Barbara Strongly, Governor, will pick up on the Council of Governors and engagement activities during the year. And then there's a presentation from on brain tumour pathway by Andy Broadbelt, who's our new medical staff governor and a consultant neurosurgeon. He's being joined by Emma Willoughby and Sam Holman, and that will take place later. The reason we're going to run through all that is so you forget not so you forget the questions you write us through, or it's so that the presentations can flow on in terms of a good set of information. So if you have questions, if you're not in the room, please use the virtual box. If you're in the room, if you need a pen or paper, just let Nicola know or me or give us the paper. And we'll take questions at the end. I've had 2 requests to finish the meeting either at 4:30 as near as possible or 4:45. Ladies and gentlemen, there's only so much I can do in terms of getting these presentations out to you in a sensible way. I will ask and have asked the presenters to be as brief as they can, but equally I don't want to disrupt you getting the proper information that you should have today at this members' meeting. So there will be an emphasis on speed, but there will be also an emphasis on getting information across to you, which hopefully you'll find useful. About which, no more from me. I'm going straight into the presentation on transcranial MRI guided focus ultrasound. No, we're not, because Jay's not here. It's not arrived. Okay, we're going on. And unfortunately, the slides are in such a way that actually it may be I give you a presentation on transcranial, which would be an interesting presentation for all of you to be. Hello. Because you're not, it's very nice to see you. You've not got a Jay Canninger. Nicola, can we try and contact you? Okay.
Don't we move on to Jan?
You can't hold slides in order.
No, it's fine, we can move on to it, but we can flick through.
Okay, in which case, let's go to the annual report from the Chief Executive, Jan Ross. A seamless problem resolved.
I will stand up for one, it's a little bit easier, isn't it?
Are you standing up or yours?
Put my heels on as well, especially if you still come out of behind. Okay, so from a sort of annual report point of view, we've just pulled together a presentation which highlights hopefully some of the achievements really for Walton Centre over the past year. I guess for me, when I stood here this time last year, I'd only been in post for a number of weeks, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks. So for me, I'm really proud to stand here, having been the Chief Executive for a whole year and survived being a year as the Chief Executive. So if we flick onto the first slide, I think it's fair to say that it's been a really difficult year again, and despite it being slightly more improved than the year before, which obviously we were in a full pandemic and crisis management sort of command and control environment, I think what was noticeably very, very different this year was the sort of flux and change and need to adapt and react quite quickly to changes in the, as an organisation, I guess, the political and national environment, as well as the expectation. Do you want to go back? The expectation on us at a regional level, and that change, as Matt talked about earlier, of a shift towards a different model really for delivery from an NHS point of view, in that we are working as an integrated care system, and there's a real change from the expectation of competition really. So I think if you look back to the NHS pre-pandemic and the sort of 5 years prior to that, we were very much set up to compete and to try and be the best, and this caused then a lot of duplication in services and variation in outcomes from a patient point of view. So the positive shift from a national level is the move to ICS and moving away from that competitiveness and more of a collaborative approach to healthcare, and looking at where outcomes are better from a patient perspective, trying to reduce the variation that people get within different areas. So we've really embraced that as an organisation, and hopefully you'll see that in some of the things that we've achieved. And then also, as Max talked about before, as a provider then, as a provider of healthcare, we're working really closely as a provider collaborative to ensure that some of those expectations from an ICS and from a high level are delivered on the sort of footprint that we sit in. So as I say, COVID-19 certainly didn't go away in this year, and what was really telling from an organisation is how good we've got to be responsive to that. So we talked earlier in our Council Governors meeting about performance and how we're doing with regards to trying to recover some of those patients who waited during that COVID pandemic, because we all know that we stopped doing elective activity and really focused on patients who had COVID or required sort of support from us as an organisation. That then meant there was a build-up of waiting lists, and so then we had patients who'd waited 104 weeks, 78 weeks and 52 weeks for treatment. So the focus has really been on trying to eradicate those long waiting patients. But what's been difficult and the bit that makes me really, really proud to stand here today is that we could adapt and move around and change things to enable us to continue to treat those patients in a timely manner, but also still manage peaks and troughs of that pandemic. So we still have throughout the year increases in sickness levels, and we're still seeing sickness levels higher than what we'd ever seen prior to the pandemic. And also expectations of us to support wider system when other organisations were struggling, and also patients. So although we would have staff sickness, we could plan for patients' procedures, but actually then they can't choose themselves or the family of COVID, and therefore you then can't plan your treatments as easily as you could sort of pre-pandemic. So we are not back to the activity levels that we were pre-pandemic, but we're certainly making fantastic improvements in the number of patients that we're seeing. So as it says on there, we're not quite back to those levels, but we are getting there, and we're certainly achieving the trajectories that we set ourselves to get back to that. And we continue to meet all the national expectations on us. So our cancer performance is really, really good. Our diagnostics performance is really good, so we're still meeting those expectations. Obviously, we've continued to try and support our staff through all of that and all of those changes and all of those expectations. We run our staff vaccination programme, which again was really challenging, and you will remember that there were lots of nuances to that and lots of variations in what the expectations of us as an organisation was. And I'm sort of go back through the slide. The other thing that was really tricky and remains tricky and responsive is around visiting. So again, really recognising, you know, particularly for me, I could really see the change in support required for patients really when those visitors weren't able to come into the organisation. So we tried to adapt quite quickly to allow visitors back in as soon as we could, but putting the measures in place that we needed to do. And I think this is, again, with some of the other things that we will need to do going forward on living with COVID and managing COVID as a healthcare organisation, is quickly react to numbers and variations within the population. So again, a really difficult year, but really proud, and really, as an organisation, we've still managed to achieve some fantastic things despite all of this. But we can't forget that it still wasn't an easy year just because we moved into sort of lower COVID numbers. So the next slide really focuses on some of the things that we did do. So again, despite all of that, we still focused on trying to ensure that we delivered best treatment and care for our patients. And this is not a list that is exhaustive, just this is all we did, but these are some of the more high-level things that we got some recognition for and that had a bigger impact on patient numbers. So we moved to 24/7 thrombectomy within this year. So again, this is a service that is an enhanced stroke service that we were starting to deliver, but as the year went on, we managed to move to 24/7, so we can provide this service 24 hours a day. And we're really proud of this. We are one of very few organisations that's providing this. We managed to again get some positive communications out around this, and we've seen some really good patient outcomes. And we had a patient stories board of somebody who had been through this treatment and had really good outcomes. So again, it's about that collaboration across the wider system. So these are patients that present to other areas partners, and then we can bring them to the Walton Centre, provide the service, and then repatriate them back to those other organisations. So a really positive in some of the services that we provide and pushing those boundaries and making sure that we are delivering what we need to. Rapid access to neurology. So this was something that we tried during the COVID pandemic. So it was about trying to support patients who turn up at A&E departments and require some neurology input, and we've managed to again span this out and try and capture a wider population. It's still an improvement. Again, we talked earlier about realigning some of our bed base to enable to support this and have the capacity to be able to see as many patients as we possibly can, like who are attending A&Es and require some specialist input to try and help with the flow across the system. Again, we talked earlier in our Council of Governors meeting about being awarded the Tessa Jowl Centre of Excellence Award, and this is around working again closely with our Claxbridge Cancer Centre and the North Wales Cancer Treatment Centre, where we sort of collaborate, if you like, on bringing tumour treatment. But this award is particularly sorry, I'm particularly proud of this one because I think this spans across what we as the Walton Centre see as a key component of what we do really around making sure that we treat their whole patients. So this isn't just about outcomes for patients from a cancer point of view, but also the holistic and compassionate way that we treat them and their families, but also lends into clinical trials and research opportunities. So it sort of encompasses everything that we would want to do for a patient. So again, another recognition really of some of the work that we are doing. We became the spinal surgery regional centre during this year, which again is something that we've been working on for several years across Cheshire and Merseyside. Going back to my previous point around trying to ensure that the outcomes are standardised across the system and making sure that all patients receive that sort of high quality care really. So we have slowly brought all spinal surgery into the Walton Centre, and the sort of final piece of that jigsaw was moving the loved part of the service over to university hospitals within this year, and so we've moved 7 surgeons over into our spinal team within this year and completed that whole sort of piece of work, if you like. So we are now the spinal surgery regional centre for Cheshire and Merseyside, so again that should really sort of improve those outcomes from a patient point of view. Some other things on there which I'm not going to go through all of them in so much detail, but again we do really, really well from an organ donation point of view, and we continue to be recognised as one of the top centres with that. Again, that's about that holistic approach to outcomes versus the compassionate way that we treat patients and their families. The MR guided ultrasound, I won't say too much about because now joins us and we'll talk you through that. But again, another proud moment for us as the Walton Centre. Again, we talked about our national inpatient survey earlier on in our council of governors, but we did score overall a score of 9 out of 10 for our overall experience of patients. So this was one of the top scores nationally. I think 9.1 was sort of the highest that any organisation came close to. So again, just giving us some feedback around what it's like to be an inpatient here at the Walton Centre, but again, still lots of work to do. And then I guess just to pick up on our continued focus on education. We've seen almost 400 medical students through the trusted placements in the last year, and we received a lot of singled out really and consistent high feedback around the experience that those medical students had here at the Walton Centre. So again, it encompasses sort of everything that we want to be doing and how we're doing that. So next slide, please. Staff, I think for those of you that know me really well, I think we sort of move into that staff are our key priority and are our biggest assets as an organisation. So the only way that we can do all of that is by looking after our staff. So we've really tried hard to continue with that support and recognising as a board that it's vital to delivering the outcomes from a patient point of view. We, I suppose, can recognise that through some of the ways that we measure our staff's experience here at the Walton Centre, and we've done that this year again through Investors in People Gold. So this is a measure, if you like, of an industry standard, not an NHS standard, around looking at lots of different elements of how we treat our staff and how our staff feel, things that we've got offer for our staff. So it brings all of that together into scores you, rates you, and again we've come out as gold. So a bit of a recognition for the things that we are trying to do and making sure that we're sort of hitting the point, if you like, from a staff point of view. Lots of emphasis on health and wellbeing, and there's some things that we've done throughout the year that is new to us as an organisation, as well as continue to do the things that we have been doing. So a focus on mental health and making sure that we've got lots of people in the organisation who are trained to support and deal with any mental health issues. We've got an occupational health service. We've been doing some health MOTs with staff and giving them some different opportunities. And we've got lots of employee benefit services, so we've moved into an arena where we've got an app for staff to be able to tap into that gives some psychological support, but also really practical support around loans and different ways of using salary sacrifice to be able to use their money wisely, if you like. Again, on the back of COVID, we've really recognised the need to push further with flexible and agile working for people, because they have different access issues with regards to coming into work, but also from a home-life balance point of view, that there are people who now require to do things differently. So really sort of focused on what those policies were there, but refreshing and making sure that they were real for people and and are supported by the managers if that's the way that they want or need to work, and obviously ensuring that it balances out the service that we're trying to deliver. And we've done lots of work around trying to improve some of the rest spaces that we've got staff, and sort of further work to do with that, and lots of plans in place for the year as we move ahead. Next slide. Some changes at the top. I think you probably already know these, but within the year we appointed our new chair in Max, and Paul's not happy with his picture, so we'll get another picture of Paul. But also Professor Thornday and Ray Walker, and I think from a point of view of thinking about what we need to deliver and some of the things I talked about earlier on, I think these 3 appointments really do support our board in becoming more aware of some of the opportunities that are available to us and where we sit as an organisation. So, within that Liverpool region, Max is born and bred in Liverpool and is really supported across, well, don't make it sound very old, but a long-spanning career in the Liverpool system, understanding sort of what we need to do and how we can perform better as an organisation. So it's been a real support to me in the past year, but also as an organisation we can feel that support come through around some of the things that we need to do. Professor Paul May, I think most of you will hopefully know because he has been here longer than the building. And his picture portrays. Yeah. But I think, Paul obviously has the experience and the absolute passion and desire to see the Walton Centre achieve what it needs to achieve, and therefore from a board perspective really challenges us as execs in thinking about how we can continually improve in areas that obviously he has an expertise in and has a real drive to make sure that we get it right. And then Ray Walker, who is a nurse, registered nurse, and really again has massive experience across the whole of the NHS really, so not necessarily Cheshire Merseyside, but Department of Health and Higher Education, and again can really support some of what we need to do with regards to those clinical services and our staff going forward. So real assets in a board, I think, really shaping what we need to do and how we need to move on. The next slide, please. So again, our fantastic charity, despite the fact that, as you can imagine, the pandemic really put pressure on charities per se, because a lot of the things that charities, and particularly our charity, would do to raise the funds then became sort of unavailable to us because a lot of them were social events and required lots of people being together. So we've really suffered over the last couple of years, but again came back strong last year, and we had some fantastic events, including our Jam Birthday Ball, which was our 10 years anniversary last year, and we fantastically managed to raise £72,000 for the Walton Centre charity, which was just unbelievable in that year really. So again, all very well received and will be used. So the purpose of the Jam Birthday Ball this year was around virtual reality and neurosurgery and how we can use that for training. So again, always really good schemes behind the Jam Birthday Ball, particularly. It's very well thought through, and we will be doing the same again in a month's time. Staff support, again, our charity will support staff environment as much as we possibly can. So we did an improvement in the doctor's mess. When you think about some of the things we talked about with lumpectomy, and doctors have to stay on site more than probably we ever have, went down well from improving those sort of rest facilities for our doctors, and then also they supported the Breathe Easy Garden from their staff wellbeing point of view. Continue to try and ramp up that fundraising. So again, we have the virtual London Marathon and the walk for Walton, so starting to get people back outdoors and mingling in different ways to support the charity. So again, a massive thank you to our charity, and a much more successful year than it had been in the previous years. And I think that is me. I was then going to hand over to Andy and talk about the trust strategy, but we'll go back to the beginning and hand over to Dr. Piper, and then we can pick up where we're up to with regards to this charity after that.
We'll just have to pause for a couple of minutes while we get the slides.
Yeah, well, if there's any questions on any of that whilst we get the slides back to the beginning, I'm obviously happy to take or anything you expect to pick up on.
So this is now really almost as smooth as I hoped it would. Are there any questions? Because we've got to read it through And by the way, Elaine, if it's possible, after Dr. J, I'd like Elaine, I'd like Barbara to present because she's got a pressure on her diary.
That's fine. Sam's actually control the slides, so we'll just show to Sam.
Any questions from the Chief Executive Board? No? No? Okay. Any problem, anybody virtually? No, okay. So, the next presentation is from Dr. J. Banneker, who's a consultant urologist. He's going to talk to us about transcranial MRI guided focused ultrasound, which is a particular breakthrough that's been made in this hospital, which we are very proud of, and he has been one of the leading figures in this piece of work. So perhaps as the slides come on screen, Dr. Banneker, you might just stand up and talk to us. Give us a lead in, what are you going to talk about?
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I'm one of the urologists working in the movement disorders field, and I was supposed to be talking to you about this with my colleagues, unfortunately couldn't be here because of other commitments. So we are all excited about this transcranial MRI focus ultrasound. So I just wanted to give you an overview about this very innovative treatment for finishing body essential tremors. So just a little bit of background about this condition. So it's the commonest movement disorder, but it does not get as much backlash as conditions like Parkinson's disease or disease. So Parkinson's disease is quite disabled in majority of cases, whereas essential tremors are not. In at least half of the cases, it is manageable in patients, but it's much more common than conditions like Parkinson's disease. And the difficulty in managing essential tremors is that at least in half of the severe cases can be poorly responsive to medical management. So there are 2 or 3 common medications which we are trying to treat patients with essential tremors, and then usually we get stuck, but we don't have other major options for treatment. Conventionally, we had deep brain stimulation as an option, which has been around for around 20 years, but we have been offering deep brain stimulation to our patients for many years, but we always find that patients are often reluctant to undergo the treatment, mainly because it is an invasive treatment. So, so just to give you an idea, like out of the 50 or just under 50 deep brain stimulating implants that we do in a year, probably only a handful or 5 a year we implant for essential tremors. So it's not even though it's an accepted treatment for essential tremor, we don't do that often. And so there was a real need for new treatment of options for managing essential tremors. And then roughly around 2015, a trial started. It was a large multi-center trial trying this new treatment. So we'll come to the details of the treatment in a minute. And then NICE approved the treatment in 2019, and NHS England commissioned the treatment 2021. And at that point, Imperial College, which was part of the initial clinical trial, was able to offer this treatment, and Walton Center, a few other centers, to become the second center in the country to offer the treatment, and we were successful. We were with a lot of people, and we started the service this year, and on the 31st of March, we started treating patients, and so far we have treated around today. As of today, we have treated around 7 patients for success with this treatment. Next slide, please. So this is just the pathway that we have for ultrasound treatments. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but essentially we will be treating patients from the entire north of England. So this commission to treat all referrals from north of England. So and the commission is for treating 75 patients a year, so 75 treated by us and 75 by London. So it's total 150 patients treated. And we have set up 2 dedicated clinics to accept these referrals. So 2 clinics are being and there are 4 neurologists running those clinics, taking turns. And then after that, we have a combined neurology surgery clinic where they come and after the initial screening clinic, select number of patients come to that clinic. So it is expected that there will be around 650 national referrals for this treatment based on the numbers given to us by NHS England, out of which will be screening and selecting 700 patients annually for treatment, and then they come and undergo a CT scan to look at the calcium density in the bones to confirm that they are eligible for the treatment. And then there are kind of the usual part of the function survey where there is a discussion, the NDT meeting, and then they go on after. Next slide, please. So this is a slide just to show the localization of where we actually treat. So what we target is essentially the tumor network in the brain, and there's this specific nucleus in the brain called thalamus. It's called the brain nucleus, and we usually target that area with the thermal ablation, and that's what actually helps control the tumors. Next slide, please. So this is again another view of the thalamus where we are treating. Next slide. So a lot of planning goes into most treatment. So to be honest, I always tell people that he does a lot of hard work actually even before the patient does the treatment stage. So usually it takes 1.5 to 2 hours to actually do this planning before the patient actually even comes to the hospital. So the planning in Mustang is usually done in a week or two before the actual procedure under general anesthetic. And using the fractography, we are actually able to localize each area to treat. And the targeting is probably the most important aspect of this treatment, because if you get the target wrong, the patient can end up with stroke-like symptoms like hemiplegia or uncontrolled involuntary movements like polio. So a lot of complications can happen if the targeting is not right. Next slide, please. And again, this is another view of the space. Next slide. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide. So this is our first patient. Can we play the video? So this is a 66-year-old woman. She has suffered from essential tremors for many years. She's a retired nurse, and she actually had to take the major retirement because she found it difficult to do examination and to find work with her hands. She's right-handed, and so she found it difficult to work, and she took premature retirement because of that. And she had tried several and had failed. And so she had been coming to my clinic for a few years, and she had declined deep brain stimulation surgery. So she was eligible for DBS, but she had declined because she was not very keen on invasive surgery. And this was when we considered her for deep brain stimulation, for ultrasound treatment. And so she was the first patient that we treated. Can we play the next video? So just to show the functional problems that she was facing, so she would find it difficult to hold a cup in her hand because of the shaking and the spinning of her hands. And this is a post-operative. So this lady was treated.
To the top, please. To the top.
Oh, she's in there.
You are. Lovely.
What am I doing with this one now?
So one of the disadvantages of this treatment is you can only treat one limb at the moment. So it's only licensed to treat one side. So there is a trial which has actually shown that you can actually treat both sides safely in a staged fashion. But at the moment, the licensing is only to treat one limb. So she was asking when she will get treated on the other side. So
you're going to stand up, walk to me, turn around and come back and sit down. But we need to time it. So.
Okay, sit down first.
So you're going to.
That's fine. So far it has all gone to plan, and we are hoping to treat the 35 patients a year with treatment, and we are getting numerous referrals from out of the region. India has a huge waiting list. They have a 4 to 5 year waiting list currently for the patients, so it's expected that they will be transferring some of their patients to us.
Thank you. A Walton Centre breakthrough. How many patients have we treated so far?
I think today, as of today, 7.
Right. So, any questions on presentation in the room? Yes.
Thank you. I mean, fantastic, isn't it? It's really good. Just a slight question. As it's a non-invasive technique, why would it's not hair-shaped?
Because ultrasound is, and the ultrasound is, they actually can, refractive it actually goes to the hair. So they need a good medium ideally. So what happens is that the hair is completely shaved, and then before we put on the ultrasound helmet, they actually have the membrane affect the hair. And they say it's a bit like the room into water, it gets up and on the scalp, and then the ultrasound helmet is put on. Because ultrasound passes much better than, for example, hair academy and interaction with ultrasound.
I was looking at the same thing, because I've seen you guys do some amazing things, perhaps.
I think we all got that, thank you.
I wondered if sorry, yes, I wonder if the effect was permanent. And I'm also, is that intervention that we translatable for other conditions? Do you think now you're working on that already, or are there any plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So very interesting. So first of all, regarding whether it's permanent or not. So it's a very new treatment, and the longest follow-up data that we have is 4 years, and 4 years is actually permanent. So it's only small number of patients. I think it's only 3 patients or something. So yeah, they have data to show that. And regarding the second question, yes. So in the US, it has been approved for treating Parkinson's disease as well, and it's anticipated that other indications will follow over time.
It works well for people with Parkinson's.
Yes, for dominant Parkinson's.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? One more, Sue?
You've done 7 patients so far. When do you plan to get up to 75 a year? Will that be in the next 12 months or longer term?
Yeah, so at the moment we are somewhat limited by, so the inside the company, they have to certify us as a center before we can actually start treating patients on our own. So for the first 15 treatments, they have to be there. So we are somewhat limited by their availability. So at the moment we are doing maximum 2 patients in a month. So that will, so once we are certified as a center, then we are looking at probably 1 to 2 treatments per week.
Next.
Sorry. I wondered what the centre was doing about it from a press perspective, because that's a big story as well.
Elaine?
So when it was on Granada Reports, when we did the first case, Maureen was interviewed along with Jane Gibral, and as a result of that and other social media, I know the ops team have had quite a lot of inquiries through from interested patients, and about 20 came into the comms team as well. So yeah, it was a really big story. It was for about 6 minutes.
Sam, you would want to comment? Or?
I can confirm what Elaine said, because I worked with Jane on this setting up this service, and so we have asked a lot of emails through asking questions. So.
Okay.
And just one to add, we're doing a national Trevor Foundation meeting on on this box. So it's on the 1st of October in the city center. So that is also some.
Any final questions in the room? Any questions from colleagues who've joined us virtually? No?
No comments.
Sorry, yes.
No comments.
No, sorry. Yes, that was on there. Sorry about that. As you can see, this is a remarkable breakthrough, a remarkable treatment, and I think we'd all want to say to Dr. Banniger and the team and all involved, Godspeed, and let's hope we contribute more people to this debate. And the Walton Centre receives the credit it should get for pioneering this kind of treatment. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, you're very welcome to stay, or if you've got things to do, it's entirely up to you. I think you'll have heard some of the presentations before, I guess. We're now going to swap back to trial because Barbara's got a pressing family engagement she has. I don't want to have to rush later. So we've gone on your agenda to item 8, which is the lead government report, and I'll ask Barbara to stand up and present to you.
Yeah. I'm not going to be speaking for very long. The 2 things we're going to talk about are the election and governor and member engagement. So next slide, please. So we started off with 11 vacancies. when we went to elections. The nominations opened on 6th of June, and of the 11 vacancies that we had, we actually managed to fill 7. The problem being that we didn't get one from North Wales, which is a shame, but and 3 out of the 6 had filled. Next slide, please. So anyway, the good news is that we've now got these new governors, some of whom are here, and I'll shout out all the names just because I don't know who's here and who isn't. Teresa Moretti, Carol Hopwood and Belinda Shaw are all Merseyside. Carol Hulse from Cheshire, Jeff Hayes and John McClellan from the rest of Wales. Sorry, the rest of England and Wales. And Andrew Rothelt, who's here. Next slide. Welcome to all of you. I'm really glad that we've got some new governors. So next slide, please. So departing governors, it's quite sorry to see that we've got John Lloyd-Jones and William Gibbons going, Cameron, Chris and Dr. Reece Davis, who I think he's still in the trust.
Very much so.
Just finished it.
Right. Next slide, please. Okay, so governor engagement has been really, really difficult since the beginning of the pandemic, and there were casualties, I think, in the sense that we did lose governors over the 2 years. But the good news is, because of the innovations, we've actually been able to streamline the way we do things. And there was a governors meeting last week, which was actually only 8 minutes long, and if it had been in person, it's what the impact of that meeting would have been on, well, the footprints of the trust and everything else. So, and the people who had to come all the way here. So that was a great meeting done online. Nevertheless, it's quite clear from surveys that we did with governors, they would rather come in and engage with staff in the trust and speak to patients and have meetings in person if that's appropriate, which it is, for example, for this one. So I think what we've now got is a very good blended system of in-person meetings and online, or both. So we've had all our regular meetings. I won't go through what they are because it's totally exciting. But what is good is the learning and development that's going on now. So the governor induction course coming up next month, which I hope that the governors can be able to attend. It's held in the Liverpool Heart Chest, and it's very good. And in fact, even if you're not a new governor, it's probably a good idea. I saw the last one online and refreshed on it. In fact, learned a few new things. There's the NHS provides us a Govern Well training programme, which is very good. It's recommended, and a lot of things on it are free, but not all of them. And then there's Pan Liverpool, because we're all now in a bigger group in the ICS, we have got the offer training from other trusts. So we have actually taken up for those offers in the last 6 months, I think. Okay, next slide, please. Right, so membership engagement. Again, similar thing, restrictions for members who would normally be able to do things like come on walkabouts and just generally have more interaction with the governors and the trust. Now that we're back to pretty much almost normal working, that's going to be much better. And there's some events that we've already had, and there's some still to come. So we've had a membership event on pain management, which I attended, and it was really good. There's been a coming a governor presentation online, which I think, as a result of it, there were 3 people actually stood as governor as a result of that. So that was actually a good exercise. Coming up, I think, is allied health professionals and radiology. So I think, I can't remember the date later in the year. And then there was a consultation event for members on the trust strategy, and there's obviously the elections and some Euro matters and everything, which I think, is it quarterly? Yeah, which goes out quarterly, all of which are helping us to get back in touch with our members. Just to say, I forgot from the last slide, as far as the strategy development is concerned, governors were also involved in 3 sessions of the strategy development. So we do feel as if things are improving now after quite bad time. I think is that the end? Yeah. Any questions?
Okay, before I take any questions, I think those of you who know Barbara know she carried out her duties in a hugely conscientious and diligent way on behalf of as the governor, lead governor. And I'd just like to say, probably today, but thanks to her for the way she goes about her duties, the way she holds us to account, and as I say, her diligence and her conscientious nature are just something to be honest. So thank you very, very much indeed. Any questions for Barbara? In the room? I think we can go home tonight. So any questions in the room? Any questions on screen? Any questions on screen?
No.
No? Okay. You may see Barbara step off because of a family matter. So when you need to go, please go. Okay, we're back to the normal running order. And just to remind people, we're going to take a report on the trust strategy, which I'm going to ask Jan to produce very briefly before Andy takes us through the detail. Then Mike on the accounts, and will be supporting Mike in terms of the view from our auditors, the trust constitution, which I will take, and then a final report on the brain tumour pathway, which 3 colleagues will be presenting on. So that's where we are. We're now going to talk about the trust strategy. Jan's going to introduce this before I go to Andy.
Okay, so I think, well, I hope most of you know that we have developed a new trust strategy which will run for 3 years, so from 22 to 25. Really recognise the fact that I was appointed as the chief executive, and really the talks that we'd had prior to that as an executive team, the strategy that we had in place that should have run for another year or so. Was sort of not really fit for purpose given some of the changes that we talked about earlier in the meeting in my update around the ICS and the shift towards a more collaborative approach to healthcare, but also the changes in sort of public expectation of us as an organisation with regards to the pandemic. So I would just like to say a massive thank you to Sun, who is the medical director and deputy executive who took on the role of really helping with developing the strategy. And also Julie Riley, who was appointed as the Deputy Director of Strategy to support Andy in this, and I know that they've done a lot of work with really engaging with the right people to develop this strategy. So it really is, as I said earlier on, it's our strategy now, and we'll talk through the highlights of what that looks like and what our key ambitions are, and then we can start to get into the detail on how we deliver that strategy and what it means and what it means 3 years time and so I'll hand over to Andy and say thank you to everybody.
The only word I'd add to the chief executive is that Andy will talk in strategy briefly, because he could be here for an hour because he is so imbued in the strategy.
That's one word, right? Yeah, thank you. I'm conscious of the fact that some of you here heard us talk about this earlier on, so I will try and pick out some key highlights of mine, so for the benefits of timekeeping as well. So if we move on to the first slide, we try and set the context for why we've done this as we have, and it's partly, as I said, the post-COVID NHS and the changes to the system in the NHS meant that this was required. This is taken from one of the introductory pages within the strategy document. The graphic on the right really just outlines some of the key aspects of the services that we provide. And we have vision, mission, and the values highlighted down the left here as well. We actually looked at these and compared to the previous strategy, and we didn't feel that there was a great deal of need to make major changes here. And in the mission statement, it has actually altered slightly to incorporate the focus on health inequalities and collaborative working with partners. But otherwise, we felt that the vision was still appropriate, and obviously the Walton way values that we've had in place in the trust for quite a long time now, we still feel that's well embedded, and that is recognised and taken on board by other staff, and staff seem to own that principle. So, go next slide. I'm not going to go into any detail through here, but just to tell you a bit about the process as well. So it's really been going for many months now, where we've engaged with groups of staff, individual staff, but also in the strategy documents, a long list of organisations from outside of the trust who we've engaged with as well as with some of our partner trusts, people from within the integrated care system wider. So if we move on to the strategic aims, which again we discussed this a little bit earlier, that this is a graphic taken from the document where we've picked out 5 key strategic aims. Again, we did discuss this earlier about recognising that this is really all focused on patient care and quality of care, and we do strongly feel that these 5 aspects all feed into that in different ways. Focus on education and training. Really, that's not just about the obvious about training our own staff, but it's again about how we do that in the current system in the modern world, where we're looking much wider afield and how we help with primary care, how we help with secondary care, so how we help any patient presenting within this region with a neurological problem, and how we can help support that. Research and innovation, we've had quite a lot of conversation about that in the Council of Governors meeting today. Again, we all feel that that's a strong area that we need to support, and there's real opportunities now for us to develop that further in collaboration with some of our education institutes. Then we've really built relationships over the last couple of years. Leadership, again, that's partly looking at staff, partly looking at how we operate as an organisation. So we recognise that we do need to really focus on our staff and give staff the opportunities to develop leadership roles, to get training in that, but also as an organisation we can develop ourselves as a leadership, as leaders. We would already see ourselves as leaders in neurology, neurosurgical, pain rehabilitation within the region, but we need to do more about what we can offer the system as that system leader. Collaboration is something we've talked a lot about. We've always, if we look back to the first slide and see the way that we run our model, particularly with neurology, it's been going on for more than 20 years now, where the premise of the model is collaborative working, how we work across the system, across a much wider system, not just here. We've really focused on how we can push further with some collaborative work around our key services, and we'll be really taking that further forward. And something that we've always done, but maybe not done in as focused a way, has been around our responsibility as an organisation, the social aspect, and really looking at how we support our community. That we've discussed the way that our buildings in Liverpool, but we serve a much wider population across Cheshire, Merseyside, North Wales, Isle of Man, and further afield, and how we look at how we can serve all of our patients equally, how we can look after our staff that live in different areas as well. And there's lots of work that we've been doing with regard to how we work as an anchor institute, how we link in with our communities more closely. So this is an area which we're really starting to get more into and develop. There's a lot of work that we're doing there, as well as sustainability, again, a key agenda item there. So if we move on to the next slide. Underpinning all of this are going to be then some detail. Again, we've had some discussion again today about, well, where's the key deliverables, how are we going to know whether you achieve this. We're going to have sub-strategies, which we've had a lot of debate when we looked at this as to actually, have we got too many things here, but we're really keen that we need all of this, we need the detail in here, that feeds into all linking in with the main strategic aims that we have there. So we'll be developing those, which will get much more in the way of detail, which will then, if we move on to the next slide, which will then move on to how we know we've delivered this. How do we then develop the key milestones, the key indicators that we're going to be delivering this, and how we present that back to Trust Board on a regular basis, how we present that back to staff, how we present it to governors, and how you can hold us to account for actually are we doing what we say we're going to be doing. And highlighted there that there will be key objectives that will be highlighted. There'll be a new board assurance framework which is being developed, which will look at the risks associated with achieving our ambitions. And this is all about how we really work on the excellent progress that we've been making, despite the challenges over the next couple of years, and how we really work where we're going to focus over the next 3 years. That's all I was going to say. Thanks.
Thank you indeed. We're getting straight on now to one of the most important people in the trust. He knows I think this already. To Mike Burns, who's going to talk to us about the annual accounts, and he'll be immediately supported by Angela, who will give a report from our auditor's point of view. I know some people will see the second presentation. Angela's going to pick out the highlights to cover the main issues, because we do have 1 or 2 or 3 members who worked with us before, so we should cover it properly. So, Mike, over to you.
Cheers, Max. Just to sort of start off, as I know my subject, my children tell me I think it was boring job in one centre. I suggest I start off with an accountant joke, so just indulge me for a second. So why did the accountant fall off his bed? We did have a balance sheet. So I'll continue. What's the next slide?
I know what's that. Don't give up your day job.
Obviously not. So in terms of the financial performance for 21-22, the trust were required to deliver a break-even position, and we did. And that was in line with what Jan was talking before, and around the integrated care partnership. The break-even did include recovery funding for our elective recovery, which we did perform quite well in, but just below plan of 2.8 million, and we still had ongoing COVID costs of around £1 million, which were actually recovered. They were exceptional costs of the pandemic. But as you can see, our turnover increased by 11%, and that was based really on block and our expected activity during that period. Expenditure increased also by 17.1 million, so as you can see, there's a bit of difference there between the two. So we did have to utilise some non-recurrent items to deliver the break-even position in the year. Cash was healthy. We had a £5 million increase from April 21-22, and that was driven by really increasing payables, capital, a bit of time differences really, and some management of receivables. Next slide, please. So in terms of the NHS targets that we have to deliver, the NHS single oversight framework was reinstated during 21-22, which really sort of says we're getting back to business. We are a low risk trust. We're one of the 3 in Cheshire and Merseyside with a minimum risk rating of 1. And as we've been talking about, really, we're now managed within the care system, so we're managed with all the other trusts within the Cheshire and Mersey ICS. So we have to sort of work as a team approach really to the finances. And again, we were all asked to break even to ensure we had system break even. But we did, as I said before, we did have some additional costs in terms of which were actually recovered for COVID-19, and additional costs of CNST, which usually does hit our trust. But we did deliver exactly what we were asked to do. Next slide, please. So again, this is another sort of indication of getting back to normal. There was no formal requirement to deliver any efficiency savings in 21-22 in the ongoing pandemic, and that happened in 2021 as well. But we did have to deliver some non-recurrent efficiencies, as I said before, to make sure that we balance the books. But from now on, it's back on the table very quickly. We've got to deliver recurrent efficiency savings in 22-23, so the trust has instigated some regular weekly meetings to set up to try and identify those savings going forward, because obviously they help currently going forward. And as a team player, I would say we've actually tried to help the system non-recurrently in 22-23 by giving up some of our funding to help some of the trusts hit their financial targets in the system. So we see that as being really, collaborative, really, for the Walton Centre. Next slide, please. In terms of the investments that we've made in clinical services, this is the capital investments that we've made last year. 1.2 million in medical equipment and infrastructure. Dr. Panicus talked about before, the transcranial MRI was part of £3.4 million investment on the CT scanner. And you can see the other things there, the pipe work replacement continues. We also, it's probably worth mentioning, we had a large amount of funding from the Digital Aspirant Fund, which is helping to get our digital infrastructure back up to speed. It wasn't a back to improve it, which was a really successful bid, and that comes to the end of this year. So next slide, please. And in terms of the main revenue investments, we obviously had to keep the show on the road, and we made some investments in the oversight chemistry, and we had a successful international nurse recruitment. And again, we talked about the expenditure in relation to the COVID-19 response. They were non-cost total investments of roughly 2.6 million. Next slide, please. And the forward view, financial regime has changed, and it's continued into this year. We continue to be funded on the basis of a block. It used to be PBR, which we paid by results, and for every patient that we saw. And there's some of the things that we've adjusted for, as those in too much detail. As you'll know, or you may have heard, Cheshire and Mersey is still very financially challenged in 22-23. So again, we might be asked to improve our position in this year. And going forward, it's planned with the sort of removal of the CCG structure and some specialised commissioning structure. The funding for specialised commissioning, the majority will move to the ICB. So we need to be very cognizant of that in the future. So again, things will change, but we're hoping it will have too much impact on optimise that risk.
Thank you very much indeed. Angela, can you match our direct balance with Auditor Duke?
It actually caused me logging in. So what I wanted to discuss today was just really two things on the next slide, please. And the first one is really what our role is in terms of external audit, and the second, what is the outcome of the external audit work. But moving on in terms of what our role for external audit is, we provide independent assurance to the Council of Governors, and we've got two main responsibilities. We give an opinion on the financial statements, and that also includes an opinion on the trust's arrangements of value for money. We've also got to consider if we need to use any special reporting powers. Next slide, please. Materiality is important to us. It's the level at which we test. So for the trust, its balance is just over 3 million. So any balance and transaction of that level has some level of substantive testing. And the smaller level that you see there, just over 150,000, that means anything below that we don't report to the trust in our reports. Moving on, the next slide. This is just really setting out our key outputs during the year. So our audit plan is where we put take in January time and note what our significant risk areas are. And our audit findings report is where we report our findings from the financial statements, and that goes in June. And our value for money work is in the annual auditor's report again in June. Moving on, this next slide is probably the most key one in terms of my presentation. It's really a summary of the outcomes for 21-22. So taking the first area in terms of the financial statements, we issued an unqualified opinion on time by the statutory deadline. That was issued on the 22nd of June. Unqualified, well, it doesn't sound great to its terminology. It's actually the place you want to be. It means it's our standard opinion with no other issues to point out. It's worth noting that there were no issues arising regarding the financial statements that we raised that would have changed the primary statements. And anything we did find was just a disclosure notes, and all of them were adjusted by the trust. We did have some areas within the action plan regarding areas to aid future close down process, and again we received a comprehensive management response in terms of actioning those for the future. In terms of moving on to the second part, the value for money conclusion, again we issued it's called an unmodified opinion, which again is a standard opinion, which is where you want to be. It's meaning that we've got nothing that we need to say other than the standard report, and there were no significant weaknesses identified, and just one very minor improvement area, which we've got a detailed management response on also. And the last point on there is really important as well, that we didn't need to use our additional special powers. So the next slide is just really pointing out some of the main areas we look at in final accounts, and really it's just the ones that are really subjective and based on estimation. They have a higher degree of risk, so they were some of the key areas that we looked at in the financial statements. And then the second to the last slide is just really setting out a little bit more about the value for money arrangements. in terms of the next slide. So there's 3 areas we look at, and we have to look at is financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And then my last slide is just really just pointing out some of the key areas within those 3 sub-themes in terms of what we review. And lastly, I'm just thanking the Trust for the invite today and also presented this morning, and thanking the Trust's finance team for the collaboration and getting the audit done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item, I think you're staying with us for a little bit, yes?
After lunch, that's okay.
Yeah, good. Where are you going? Sorry.
No, just going to work, that's okay.
Oh, yeah, of course, yes. You do like it too. Thank you for being here. The Trust Constitution is an item I need to just brief on. So we need to change the Constitution to adjust the minimum number of required governments to make the decisions we need to make. This has been to all of the relevant bodies on Constitution that need to have considered it before and has been passed through for final ratification here. The current requirement is 11, which has been challenging when a number of the 33 posts are not filled, and so as far as reported earlier, some of the meetings are not quorate and things get delayed from one meeting to the next. The change is to make the position going forward of 1/3 of current governors, which would still be 11 if all posts are filled, but we would reduce if there are vacancies. So following the elections, there are now 26 governors, so that would mean there have to be a minimum of 16. Not 16 and a half governors in Robert. There have to be a minimum of 16 governors for it to be quorate. The board and the council of governors have approved the changes. It's here for agreement and ratification by the members. Are people in the room content that we make this change to our constitution, which Catherine and Nicola will then write in to make the necessary change? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Happy on the screen? Okay. It's occurred to me that there is another sort of constitutional item. I just hit it on the agenda. So let me formally welcome the new governors who are now, I can confirm, governors, and who will get the papers that they didn't get today sent to them by Nicola. So if you're planning any weekend out, forget it, your inbox will be full of reading and there'll be a test on Monday. There won't be a test on Monday, but you will get the paper sent to you by Nicola, the new governors, and we'll record the fact that we welcome you formally as a joining the governing body. Thank you for being part of the Walton Centre family. The final report today is from Andrew Rodbelt, who is our new medical staff governor, but is also a consultant neurosurgeon. He's going to be supported by Anna Welby, and he's going to be supported by Sam Holman. So if you'd like to come forward.
Where's Sam from? Yeah. Are you doing the pressing thing?
Just there, next slide, Sam will do.
Okay.
Magic.
Magic.
So I'll let you introduce your team and over to you for the final presentation before we take questions.
So I'm Andy Rodbelt, neurosurgeon. I lead on neuro-oncology here. Sam's manager person, who's very important, who does lots of the organisation, and then there's the lead clinical nurse practitioner. I've said all that right. Yeah. So they've actually changed my title, and I'm going to change it back. This is a Wisdom pathway, and this pathway was developed by Wisdom, and I make no apology for that. And it goes back to what Andy was actually saying, part of the trust strategy of working with our partner organisations. Now, when you think about brain tumour patients, we have a pretty good setup here. We have good surgeons, good nurse specialists, even good managers. And I like that. Yeah, radiology, we've got quite a good setup. But our management of brain tumours is a small part of their pathway. And actually, there's other parts of the pathway that we don't have very much control over. And there are problems with parts of the pathway. So could we have the next slide, please? Yeah. So having brain tumour, it can affect you. It affects your arms, legs, speech. It can affect who you are, how you think, how you feel, your thought processes. It's a big deal. There's lots of different brain tumours, more than 150 different types of brain tumours. We see 3 more commonly than anything else. These are just all scans of patients with brain tumours. somebody with a brain metastasis, a cancer that's spread from elsewhere, somebody with glioblastoma, a malignant type, aggressive type of brain cancer, and meningioma, a sort of slow growing tumour. These all have affect people. They have limitations on patients' life expectancy. So it's a big deal. And we can do what we do in our little bit of the pathway, but what can we do to help? And what are some of the problems with other parts of the pathway? And this is what Whiston highlighted. So can we have the next slide, please? We'd love to have a cancer system where patients come through and they come see me in clinic within a week, and they don't have to sit in A&E for 12 hours waiting for a bed in the hospital, and then another 24 hours for a scan. That's the way the system works at the moment. It goes through the A&E departments. We hear about A&E departments being completely overrun, struggling to deal with patients. This is still the way the vast majority of brain tumours get into the system. They see their GP, they often say, I kept asking for a scan, but actually it's really difficult for GPs to pick these patients up. If you think that there was a nice guidance on who GPs should scan, and it went through and it looked at all the evidence to try and pick up if there was a group of patients and a group of symptoms, they could work out who would be the best people to scan, and they couldn't. They actually just said, well, we can't actually give you any advice, but we just sort of sat around and we thought, oh, these are probably the people you should scan. So there isn't a good system of, because lots of people have headache. Everyone gets headache at some point, but who is it that's going to have a brain tumour? And that's really hard. So we treat 500 patients a year. We're one of the busiest units in the country. It's only, we alternate between Manchester and us about who treats more patients. But there's 1,500 referrals a year. There's a lot of patients that never make it into the Walton Centre, or that are stuck in A&Es around the country, or stuck on the around the region, or stuck on the wards. So can we have the next slide, please? And as I said, it's a long journey. So they'll see their general patients, they go in A&E, they might be under medicine, they might be under acute oncology, they might be referred into neurology. They then come to us. Yeah, we know what we're talking about. Neurology sometimes do, but we do. And then, I'm sure you do, Dr. Nicholson. And then they go into clinical oncology, rehabilitation. There's vast numbers of different specialties involved here. And the transfer between different specialties is not always that great. Next slide, please. So we've got a number of difficulties in the system, which I've sort of been through here. The Walton Centre on Call, we're pretty much overloaded now. We get 50 new referrals a day, with 40 or 50 callbacks a day. So this, and we have a registrar full-time trying to deal with that, another registrar helping with someone call. That's a lot of patients being referred into the system. We can't admit everybody. We will see all the brain tumour patients that we can. The other issue is, if you have cancer and you present with lung cancer and a cancer that spreads to the brain, the standard way that's treated is you deal with the lung cancer. You diagnose the lung cancer to work out whether we need to treat the brain cancer or whether that's dealt with by their pathways. That system doesn't work very well now. It takes 4 or 5 weeks to get a diagnosis, or up to 6 weeks to get a diagnosis from the lung cancer pathway. That's too long for brain cancer patients. Yet if you try and get us to try and treat them, they say, well, no, because sometimes these patients need chemotherapy. And there's a problem in the system. There's a problem with the vast number of patients. So next. And this is just to say, you know, these people don't live very long sometimes. The brain cancer patients, this is English data, 10,000 patients. If you could press the next button. So, no, oh, it didn't work. Go back. If you go back. So we've got a 6-month, 50% of people only live 6 months with a glioblastoma. Okay? With treatment, we can get it to 12, 14 months. We're getting 3-4% out to 5 years. Most people are dying within a year with this disease. So they don't have weeks and weeks and weeks to wait, and they don't want to be in hospital, they don't want to be in medical beds around it. They want to have their diagnosis, well, let's get it sorted, let's move on. Okay, let's go to Terry. So Sam's going to talk about our patient.
Our patients. So to really understand what Andy's just explained and what it means for a patient, so I know everybody's seen Terry. So Terry owns his own construction firm. He's got a wife, he's got 2 kids, both teenagers, one's going through their GCSEs at the moment, and one's just about to start his new job and he's really, really nervous about it. And on Monday, Terry goes to work and he drops down and has a seizure. And naturally, his work colleagues are really concerned, so they call an ambulance for Terry and he goes to the ED department in his local area. And when he gets there, A&E is absolutely rammed, as it is everywhere at the moment. There's ambulances down the corridor, there's staff everywhere, there's patients everywhere. And so he's met with one of the junior doctors on the ward, his consultant is dealing with a cardiac arrest in another area. But this junior doctor knows Terry, right, okay, I know this is neuro, so let's get Terry settled, let's get a referral straight into Walton. So the referral comes through. The neurosurgical registrar, as Andy said before, it receives a referral, but we don't really know what Terry's performance status is. We don't know if Terry's been started on any medication yet. We're not really sure whether Terry's scan's adequate because we've not had any referral details on that. So there's a message goes back. Meanwhile, Terry's been admitted into the ward bed because I need chocolate and they need to move him on. And so they've put him into the ward. Terry doesn't know what's going on. By this point, his wife's turned up, his kids have turned up. And so the scan's done. The next day, he stayed in overnight. The scan comes back to Walton and we look at it and we go, right, okay, there's a big dark scaly lesion on this scan, which is what Terry's been told at his local site. We need to discuss him at our MDT. But by the time that's done, he's missed cut-off for our MDT and it's a whole week before Terry's discussed. And when it is discussed by our team here, it's that Terry's for best supportive care. He's not really got long left to live, as Andy's just explained. And Terry spent 12 days not knowing what any of this means to him. He doesn't know what this dark scaly lesion means, how long he's going to have left, what his symptoms are going to be like, what his prognosis is. And meanwhile, his son's gone from being worried about his first day in work and starting a new job to, am I ever going to have to meet dad at the end of the year? So next slide, please. So along with Whiston, and as Andy said, Whiston have been a massive part of this pathway. They identified, or we identified as a collaborative trusts, some objectives to set out to make life better for Terry, for patients like Terry. So we identified that from an education point of view, there's some work to be done there in ED. We need to educate our colleagues in actually what scan needs to be done and when Terry needs his medication. Be confident in making those decisions. It's okay just because it's brain, it doesn't need to be Walton completely theirs. Let's look at how we can share our education and our expertise. We realised Terry also needed a key worker. For those 12 days he was sat at home, he has absolutely nobody to contact to ask whether these symptoms are normal. Should he be taking this? Are these headaches right? Are we allowed to take paracetamol? He had nobody to ask for 12 days. We needed to make sure he was optimised before he was discharged home. So we needed to make sure that his seizures were under control. And the appropriate imaging was done as well. At that point of attending A&E, let's get that appropriate scan done, let's stop any delays, let's get it done. Which means that the MDT discussions here are so much more meaningful. We can make a decision based on more information that we've got. And we also identified that best supportive care, what does that mean? So when Terry was given that diagnosis of give the best supportive care, well, previously in the old pathway, Terry would be sent home to the community and, okay, I'm going to die maybe soon, but how, why can't they treat me? So we identified that there was a need there for best supportive care clinics, which I'm not sure whether Ella wanted to mention it now at the end.
Should we do the pathway?
Yeah.
Should we do pathway and then we'll talk about?
Yeah, next slide. So I'm pleased to say that all of those objectives that we set up with Whiston were delivered on. We did all of those things. And so what it means now for Terry is that his scans are done on time. If he was to ever present in A&E again or another patient, not necessarily Terry this time, if all of those things carry on in place that we've set up with Whiston, his experience would be so much different, and albeit his outcome, maybe not, but his experience and his time with his family and his understanding and having that support, that key support, would completely be there for him. Next slide.
Shall I quickly talk through this? So this is basic. I've made it so you can't read it. I can only read it. And it looks really complicated, but it's not. But what it does is for the Whiston side of things, and we'll talk about where we go from here. For Whiston, it's giving them guidance on what to do. So they don't have to ring the neurosurgical registrar at every step of the pathway and wait for a reply, and they can actually think for themselves a little bit. And it divides the patients up into people with the glioblastoma and the intrinsic brain tumours, and people with cancer that's spread from elsewhere. And they're two quite different things. And the people with cancer that's spread from elsewhere are the patients who need to be worked up, staged, imaged appropriately, and treated by their local clinical oncologists, who are the cancer doctors, who can work out if they're actually going to need anything doing from the head point of view and tell us about it. The primary tumours, the tumours where the high-grade malignant tumours of the brain itself that haven't spread from elsewhere, remain our remit, because the local remit doesn't know anything about it. The acute oncologists don't really know much about those patients. So the idea was, we tell them what to do, and we say, look, we need an MR, book into the MDT, but we will see everybody. So we're not just going to see the patients we're going to operate on, because I'm a surgeon, I want to see the patients I'm going to operate on, but we're going to see everybody. And we did that a little bit before, but Wisdom was very clear that they felt that was really odd, and then that can link us in. So I'll get Emma to talk about the best supportive care clinic. So by doing it this way, and patients come in A&E, and they're not under the medics, they're going to the acute oncologists. They're going to cancer doctors who know about treating patients with cancer, and they're going within the palliative care team. So they get admitted quickly. There's none of this continuous referral to Walton. It's just referred once we've got all the information. And to try and speed up that process and make it by people who understand what's going on, so these people have a clear pathway. And so as part of that was the best supportive care clinic, which Emma will just.
Thank you. So the best supportive care clinic actually is one of the most key components of the pathway and the most meaningful for patients as well. So these are patients with, primary brain tumours, very aggressive, with very complex needs. And often, or historically, which I don't think we were fully aware of, these patients were being discharged from DJPs, no support, no clinical nurse specialist, no key worker, no oncologist that they could go to, no specialist centre that they could phone up and say, well, what am I going to expect? How am I going to deteriorate? What about end of life? What about all of these things? They have nobody apart from GP and district nurses, and their knowledge understandably is limited. So as a result, we put in best supportive care clinic. And what we do is when a patient is being recognised through the MDT that the patient is for best supportive care, we make contact with Wisdom Centre and say we would like to offer them a consultation with the responsible consultant here at Walton and the nurse specialist, and we give them protected time within that patient clinic to come face to face, review their imaging if they want to with the consultant, discuss why we've reached this rationale that they're not for neurosurgical intervention, they're not for adjuvant treatment, and ask any questions with us in terms of, what symptoms are they going to expect, how they're going to manage, speech deficit, cognitive problems, loss of vision, all these needs that they have, give them written information to back up what we're saying, and then link them in with specialist palliative care, and they've got a contact as well. But what's interesting is actually from the MDT, although we were just targeting the Wisdom patients, actually we're realising that all patients that identified for best supportive care actually need to come throughout the clinic. So actually our workload has significantly increased, and that's something that we need to look at in terms of the nurse specialists for the support and that.
And then final slide. Do you want to talk to this?
Yeah, so we held a launch Learn and Share event on the 20th of June, which was kind of coordinated by the Cheshire and Mersey Cancer Alliance. And that was to kind of give the education, explain the pathway, but also to try and engage other trusts in how maybe this could help other centres as well. So there's some phenomenal talks done by the two people stood either side of me. And we've had expressions of interest from Wirral, Warrington and Loughborough also to say that they would like to adopt this pathway in their centres. So we've got some initial discussions set up with them this month to discuss how we move this forward now to help other centres, not just Wisdom.
So sorry we've gone past your time. We're done now, and we can take questions if there's time for questions.
Well, you haven't gone past the time, and also you can have it longer because it's the kind of presentation I think is quite right again. It's a very inspiring presentation that the three of you have given us about the work, and I think it makes people proud to be part of the Walton Centre. So we've got some questions. Paul.
Two questions. One is what percentage of the primary brain tumour and glioblastoma patients end up in the supportive care pathway. But then I think what you're saying is that that supportive care pathway really is for everybody with a primary brain tumour, whether it's called something different, but they need that supportive pathway, whether they're going to get cranial neurosurgery or whether they're not going to get cranial neurosurgery, because those uncertainties, those anxieties, those the lack of knowledge, the challenges about the different neurological symptoms, what to do, how to live, what they can do from day to day, is as important, those that are on the treatment pathway, as those that are on the best supportive pathway. So how many initially would you say need the supportive therapy? But then, as I think you alluded to, everybody needs that supportive care.
So the non-surgical group, you're looking at the moment, we're probably seeing about half the number compared to the number of people we treat. So glioblastoma patients, we treat 100, 110 a year. We're probably looking at 50, something like that a year of best supportive care patients. But actually there's more than that. And it's very much an age thing. As you get older, your outcomes are worse, and sort of over 70s or over 80s. And actually, then it's actually really important to talk to these people, because then the family understand what's going on and everyone else understands what's going on. So yeah, at the moment, it's probably 40s, 50s, one a week, but it could easily be.
I haven't got the actual figures, and that's hopefully something we're going to work towards, but it's still quite early in the stages. But how we're going to do it is we're going to audit, obviously, the numbers that we're going to have, but also we're going to do like a patient experience survey as well. So actually for the family and for the patients that come through, ask them to actually, reflect on that consultation, and actually, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and, just to sort of benchmark, are we providing the right service for what they need? And that's like the next step we're going to do.
And how does this fit nationally? How does this pathway fit nationally? You've shared it brilliantly with our local regional providers.
Well, funny that you should mention that, because Whiston is very good at pushing the pathway, and we are finalists for the Nursing Times Award, or shortlisted, or something like that. I don't know, they're making me go down to some expensive, but so I guess the thing is if you can roll out in Cheshire and Mersey, they're always keen. I'm keen for the transformation programme to get into transformation programme. Unfortunately, always at the same time as the MDT, so it's not something I can ever go to. But for me, this is something ideal for the National Transformation Programme.
Thank you very much.
Other questions in the room?
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Can you say who you are again?
Sorry, Keith Swinton, former patient.
Thank you.
I identify with the lots of, the sort of problems with getting through the system. Is there any way at sort of the GP stage there could be a sort of screening? I mean, the reluctance to send people for scans, I take it it's due to the expense involved, but is there a simpler way than go straight from the CT scan or whatever to actually screen people?
So there's some interesting research going on, but at the moment, not really. The interesting research is looking at blood markers, simple blood tests, and picking up brain tumours that way. And there's quite a lot of using light spectroscopy things through blood films and stuff. But from a point of view of picking up who gets a scan and then doing a scan, the vast majority of scans are negative. If you look at that, even the patients that the GPs think, oh, this is going to be a brain cancer, let's refer them to a brain cancer. It drives the neurologists crazy, because they see a lot of, not because people need to be sick, but they see a lot of people in the emergency neurology clinic query cancer, and the vast majority of their scans are normal. And there's obviously something else going on in something else doing, but it's actually really hard to pick this up as a general practitioner from speaking to a patient, understanding, and listening to them and examining all that sort of stuff. You'd think it'd be relatively easy, but I think if you think a GP may see one patient with a brain tumour in 10 years of practice.
Any other questions in the room? Any questions online, Elaine? No? Okay. On all our behalf, I think to Andy, to Emma and Sam, huge thank you for the inspiring presentation and an excellent piece of work which is being undertaken. So huge thank you.
won't be there.
You all know, I promise. Right. Okay, Elaine, are there any questions online first before I go to the audience on the presentations on finance and on strategy? Are there any questions in the room from the previous presentations on finance or strategy? More information on strategy will be coming to you in your inboxes from Elaine or from colleagues to make sure you're fully briefed. And as I said before, for new governors, your inbox will start filling up tomorrow. I've not been notified of any business. Is there any other business in the room? Any other business certified to you, Elaine? Okay. So, to staff members, to public members, to governors, non-confirmed and now confirmed, to Neds who've been with us, to Jan and the team, a huge thank you for your participation today. This is always a difficult meeting to pull together because there are so many strands to it. We've sat very patiently, some of you, for 4 hours now, with only a 5-minute break. I think there may still be tea and coffee outside, but I can't promise it. Is there tea and coffee outside? Probably is. You may equally want to get off to where you're going to. So wherever you're going, travel safely, stay safe and well, and we'll see you over the year. But remember to be back in 12 months' time as we report further on this wonderful centre of excellence called the Walton Centre. Thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you.